Welcome, reprobate. You're listening to the Smith House Adventure Show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm Brian Smith, and with me today is Randy Turner, a retired member of Joint Task Force 2, Canada's premier special operations regiment. Also a mixed martial artist, ranked in the top 10, number 8 at the Bantamweight and number 3 at the Flyweight. And he's also the owner of Direct Action, providing full spectrum combat training. Randy, thank you very much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Brian.
So let's just get into a little bit there. What got you on the journey of being a soldier? Was it something that it was just a childhood dream, or was it something that came into it a little bit later?
Sure. I think it was as a kid, I knew I was going to do something, either law enforcement or military. I liked any opportunity when I had an opportunity hanging out with my buddies and stuff, like running around through the bush, like playing guns, like, chasing each other. And, as I got a little bit older, my mom and my dad both saw something as well, and they were pretty convinced that I'd be involved in something like that. They weren't really sure, but they said I always had an interest and a knack for either pretending like I had a gun or running around through the woods and just being a kid, right? But I spent a lot of time outdoors. I like being out in the bush, and I liked anything that had an adventure or, a little bit of, excitement or risk that was associated. And, growing up as a kid, I was constantly in and out of the hospital. I broke more bones and had more stitches than you can imagine. So I probably caused a few years deducted off of my mom and dad's life for sure. But yeah, I think it started kind of early. And then when I graduated high school in 97, I was kind of struggling to find my way. And, I applied to a couple of universities. I applied to the RCMP. Everything was thanks for applying, try again in the future. And my uncle at the time, who was in the Navy veteran, he said, "Hey man, have you ever thought about joining the military?" I was like, "Well, kind of a little bit, but not really seriously." And he said, "Well, how about this? I'll take you down to the recruiting center," because he was, an active military member in the Navy. He's like, I'll walk down there with you. It'll help if I'm in uniform, because the people that are going to be giving you the answers, they're going to see that there's, somebody in uniform, and they're going to give you the straight goods." So, okay, sure. So we went down, and he was a hall tech in the Navy. He showed me a little bit about what he does. I found that kind of interesting. So I thought, yeah, maybe I'll go down the hall tech route. And once I got to the recruiting center, there was a video playing on one of the TVs, and, there was guys jumping out of airplanes and, walking through the bush with rucksacks on. And I was like, who are those guys and what are they doing? And my uncle kind of smirked, and he's like, "That's what I thought." Anyway, so, that's how it kind of started. I did the aptitude test, did all the testing that was associated for the military. My first choice was hall tech. My second choice was another Navy trade. And my third choice was infantry. And I was hoping for infantry. That's kind of what I wanted to do. But I was okay with if I got selected for hall tech. Long story short, the results came in. The offering was infantry, and that's where I went. So from there I went to basic training, did St. Jean for 10 weeks at that time, and then went to Wainwright, Alberta for the adventure of the PPCLI.
Nice. And starting off, because it wasn't something you were like childhood where you're right into the military. What was the biggest kind of culture shock or kind of thing that when you got into the military, you're like, oh, okay, this is a little different. This is a whole new kind of mindset and personality that gets created within it?
I think the biggest shock was, the military lingo and the nomenclature that's very specific to the military. So as a civilian coming into the military, there was lots of acronyms being thrown at us and lots of different military jargon that was unfamiliar. So trying to adapt to, what the chain of command was talking about, and then trying to, apply it as best as possible. In basic training, it's as it sounds, it's basic. It's meant to, it's meant to give somebody that has absolutely no like reserve time, no cadet time. It's designed to give those folks all of the tools so they can understand, rank structure. They can understand policy. They can understand what makes the military a little bit different than, say, working at your local Costco or what have you. So that part was learning a lot really early. For me, when I left the military, or excuse me, when I left Halifax, Nova Scotia, and joined the military, that was the first time I was really away from home for a significant amount of time. So I would say being away from friends and family, and then trying to learn this whole new dichotomy of culture together, that was for a young man, that was the first real exposure to, okay, it's time for me to grow up and get a hold of this.
Awesome. So coming up in just like basic and going through your infantry trades training, what were some challenges maybe for some of the courses that you had to kind of that start of being able to push yourself and find that why you want to complete this, what you want to be doing? Where did that start to get for you? Like, was that always something that you were so like nothing can stop you, or did you kind of have to polish that and then refine that personality trait?
That's a really good question. I would say I started to take fitness pretty seriously and start to dabble with, getting stronger and fitter when I was about 16. That's probably like the first time I went to like an official gym, where I paid a membership and go to the gym on a regular basis. So I think I started that probably around 16. And then when I made the commitment to join the military, I really kicked in overdrive with the fitness, because my vision or my thought of getting into the military was it's going to be extremely hard. And, typical, like you see the movies and, what social media, now, not so much at that time, would portray as like a hardcore soldier. That's what I thought I was getting into. So I prepared myself really well. Basic training, actually, I was voted top candidate of basic training. And then when I went, not top candidate, most physically fit, excuse me. So I was voted most physically fit in basic training. And then I carried that kind of that mindset and that personal development through into infantry school. And when I finished battle school, I was nominated for most physically fit again. So from a fitness perspective, I felt like that was one area that I could control. So I was all in. I would do everything I could to be as physically fit as I possibly could. And then from all of the learning components, like all the hands and feet and all the skills that an infantryman is expected to know with land navigation, support weapons, heavy machine guns, all of that was brand new. And that was like learning, being fed through a fire hose, where you learn the material and then be expected to apply it, within a week or two. Like for me, I found it was a great challenge because that was all new. But at the same time, I think I was able to find success because the fitness side of things was not a concern. Like I think that helped me with all the cognitive side of getting through battle school, which is for folks that are not aware what battle school is. That's essentially almost 6 months of everything that a infantry soldier is expected to be pretty good at. They give you all the hands and feet to understand how to operate in a platoon function, how to navigate, how to operate heavy weapons, etc. So I think the reason that I was able to do well in infantry school was because, partially, was because I was so physically fit.
Is there still an instructor from your earlier courses or careers that left such a lasting impression on you, that either for how horrible they were and what to avoid being later on, or just that one awesome senior NCO that you're like, that is the person I want to emulate?
Yes, both. There was exposure to some really good instructors, and then there was a couple of instructors that, you could tell they didn't really want to be there, or they didn't take it as seriously as maybe they could. But you quickly identify who is serious about, being an instructor. And absolutely, at that time, when the instructors that we had putting us through battle school, you could tell that they wanted us to succeed. You could tell that they wanted us to be hardened, and you could tell that there was an investment, because their knowledge, their instructing ability, it was going to be, whether or not it would be emulated by those candidates, or it definitely be some sort of byproduct for sure of the efforts that they put in. So you could tell that they were definitely invested in seeing all these infantry soldiers that I was on course with want to see them do better, want to see them get tougher, smarter, and it was awesome. I had one particular instructor that I remember. He's actually the guy that kind of dropped the initial seed into my head with regard to JTF2 during battle school in Wainwright. I remember I was carrying a C6 at that time, so a C6 machine gun is a pretty heavy piece of equipment. I'm 5'6", 150 pounds, and I've been pretty much the same size since I graduated high school. And we're on a platoon rucksack march, so I've got the rucksack, got the C6, and somebody in our platoon fell out, so they jumped on a following vehicle, so they jumped on a truck. But the problem is that person had a Carl Gustav. So a Carl Gustav is a heavy piece of equipment that is a shoulder-fired rocket. And I remember the Carl Gustav being on the ground, the person that was carrying it on the truck, and then this one particular instructor looking at all of us in the platoon and kind of waiting for someone to grab onto it. And, he finally got things moving. He said, listen, that's a platoon support weapon. That thing is not going on the truck. You guys better figure out who and how you're going to carry that. And I remember looking around, never forget it. I'm like, I'll take it. So now I've got a Carl Gustav, and I'm not exaggerating. This is a true story. And I've got a C6 wrapped around my small frame and a rucksack. And I remember one of the instructors kind of walking away, and he whispered something to another instructor. I don't know what he said, but I could see that they were having a conversation. In hindsight, now looking back, they were probably thinking, yeah, how long is this going to last? Right? So off we go. So we start walking, and we went another probably 2 kilometers or so, and I was struggling for sure. I was hurting. And at some point, they stopped the platoon and said, okay, listen, you're a platoon, you're a team. You need to work with each other. You need to help each other. This guy's been carrying these 2 pieces of equipment for the last however many, minutes. It's time that somebody else steps up and carries the load. And it was a very pivotal time because it really illustrated the team aspect of giving and taking, right? And everyone sharing, the workload. It was a pivotal moment even more so because at the end of that platoon march, I remember that one particular instructor, he pulled me aside and he said, hey, man, and there was nobody else around. And he didn't have to say it because I'm literally on course. He's my instructor. I'm just a candidate trying to get through infantry school. And he said, have you ever thought about trying out for JTF2? And this is how ignorant and oblivious I was to the military. I said, what's JTF2? And what are you talking about? He said, man, what are you living under a rock? How do you not know about JTF2? I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But after that conversation, I did a little bit of research, asked a few questions, and then became enlightened on who and what JTF2 was. And that kind of started the thought process. And it really, I would say, invigorated or energized a thought of, oh man, I haven't even got to the infantry yet. And somebody sees some type of attribute in me that would be maybe worthy of trying out for this organization that I had no idea about.
So now you've got the seed planted in your head. What do you do once you get to battalion to start training and preparing yourself with either courses or physical training or a mental kind of training?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I went to Winnipeg. That's where the 2nd Battalion PPCLI was located at that time before they moved to Shiloh, and got there in the summer of 1999. And then 2000 is when we were notified that we would most likely be doing a peacekeeping tour. At that time, Bosnia was still going on. So in 2000, we got a heads up, started workup training, and then 2000 and 2001 is when I deployed for the first time with the 2nd Battalion. That was in a peacekeeping tour in Bosnia. So at that time was really my first kind of exposure to some guys from JTF2. There was some dudes bouncing around Bosnia doing close protection. And I ran into a couple guys that were at the gym and, awesome dudes just having, very casual conversation. And they had said the same thing, like, hey man, you ever think about trying out? And that's when it really started to come to fruition. I was like, okay, I need to start getting things into order for this. And then I started to train seriously. I put in my application when I was in Bosnia for JTF2 selection. But unbeknownst to me at that time, I put in the paperwork, I gave it to my section commander at the time, and I just kind of thought, well, it's going to get processed and I'll find out when selection is coming. Long story short, the deadline had come and gone. And I went to my section commander. I'm like, hey man, I'm just wondering like what's going on with my application. And he's like, ah shit. I'm sorry, man. It's I never pushed it up. Now, there was a moment where I was like, what? Like, why wouldn't you have like, pushed my paperwork up? Like that's like I gave it to you. I put my trust in you. Anyway, I don't cast shade on that guy. He did what he did. It went on his desk somewhere and it never got processed. But it was a good teachable moment for me where if you want something done, you got to follow it through and you got to stick with it. So the next year, now I'm on top of it, and I'm gonna go into two different phases of the next application. So the next application, this was now 2002. We deployed to Afghanistan for the first official, I guess, roto with the 3rd Battalion, so that battle group, so 3 PPCLI, and we had a company from the 2nd Battalion, 2 PPCLI. So we went in 2002. So 2002, during that time in Afghanistan, was training as much as I could with the thought of applying for JTF2 for the second time. And got to see a little bit more exposure from the JTF2 guys in Afghanistan. I was like, man, this is definitely it. I know this is exactly where I want to be, and that's what I want to do. So at the end of the tour in Afghanistan that year, I applied, put my paperwork in, stayed on top of it this time, and followed it through. And then a week before I was supposed to go on selection, I broke my wrist. And yeah, so I'm sitting with the BPSO, so it's basically like the representative from that particular battalion. So they're the ones that will control the file, move the file, and ensure that you're suitable for that job that you're trying out for, or that job that you're applying for. And when I sat down with the BPSO, she's like, "Yeah, you're not going to be." I had a cast on my wrist, and she's like, "You're supposed to be, leaving." I think it was a week or a couple of weeks, not too long. But also, my cast was set to come off in a certain time frame. I was like, "Well, maybe I can still get the cast off and then hit the last serial of selection." She's like, "No, like you need time to recover, and it's just not going to happen." So my file got pulled. So that was strike two. So now fast forward, a full year goes by. I'm super motivated now. I'm going to do everything I can to be as physically fit as I can, make sure all the paperwork administration is good to go. I'm going to take care of myself properly. Long story short, 2003 did selection and then was successful for JTF2.
That's crazy. But again, it goes to show the dedication, right? Like there's many people that be like, the sergeant didn't push it through. That's destiny. I'm just going to stick in battalion, or even the second time stuff like that, like the risk, and be like, I guess it's just fate. I'm not in it. So it already goes to show kind of the mindset of what it would take to get through selection, where it's like you kept getting these roadblocks. All right, stop, reassess. All right, now let's go down this pathway and stuff. Yeah. So that's really awesome. So once you get to that, now, because when you're doing your time too, there wasn't a lot probably even known about JTF, about selection, what to kind of expect or look out for. So while you're not knowing what's going on, what areas are you trying to really ensure are your strong points?
That's a great point. Like there wasn't a lot of information. We had a couple of guys from the 2nd Battalion PPCLI go and become successful. So they left the battalion, they were successful, and then they were a JTF2 assaulter. But once they go, at that time anyway, we didn't really hear from them. We didn't know, what selection looked like, what it took them to succeed, because they were gone and, they're doing their own thing. And there wasn't a conduit between those guys there and then the guys like myself in battalion who were thinking about trying out. So a lot of us that were interested, we were just bouncing ideas off each other. Like, well, I'm sure there's going to be some sort of height phobia. Well, let's see if we can get up on that roof and just do some stupid shit. And that's what it was kind of like. And I was like, well, we're pretty confident there's going to be a water phobia. Same thing. Well, let's get into the pool and see if we can basically drown each other. I'm like, oh man, like, what are we doing? And literally there was stuff like that where we would just train a lot of running, a lot of push-ups, a lot of rucksacking, a lot of sit-ups, and just literally training like a savage every single day because there wasn't a lot of information known about, for an example, if back then somebody had said to me, well, what energy system are you working? Is that anaerobic or aerobic? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just moving, man. I don't know. You know what I mean? So there wasn't a lot of information. And we had some great PSP staff who are like, professional strength and conditioning coaches. But even then, they were limited with information and knowledge. So there was a lot of unknowns at that time for sure.
So, what areas did you train for a lot? And now looking back at your selection, what is it like? Ah, man, my either navigation or other little things that you're like, it's just like everyone who studies for a test. You study all the sections you think, and then it's always that test has more questions on you. Like, I didn't even look at that part as much. I was thinking, these bits. Looking back, is there something that you're like, man, I spent so much time running and maybe I should have done more for upper body or certain other things like that, or flexibility and stretching? Maybe people are like, oh, I got to get strong, but maybe being a little more flexible to be able to throw those legs up over a wall or something like that would help.
That's bang on. That's a great example, actually. Sometimes an overemphasis on getting stronger, but at the risk of becoming bulky and less mobile. So, the advice that I give young men and women who are interested in trying out is, yeah, we definitely want to be strong for sure. Be able to move your body from a relative strength perspective, be able to move your body really well, whether it's under load or there's nothing on you. Flexibility is such a key component where the more flexible we are, the more range of motion we have in our shoulders, the more pliable our muscles will be, which means they can take more of a beating. The stiffer we are and the more bulky we are, the effects are it becomes more laborsome to execute on specific physical tasks. So you're absolutely right. I spent a lot of time running, therefore running was no issue. I would say I probably could have spent a little bit more time under a rucksack. I probably also could have spent a little bit more time being comfortable in the water. Now, what I mean by that is I didn't know what that was going to look like. I had no information. I was overconfident with my ability to swim, but being able to swim is different than being comfortable in the water. And without giving anything up, I would say that I do not tread water very well. And that was an area that was very highlighted very quickly.
Okay. What do you think? So do you think when people try out for selection and then fail, do you think that they almost go in it with like a battalion like mindset kind of thing where they don't quite realize what they're getting into? So they may be, it's just going to be like, back on infantry school and this and that, maybe a little bit harder. I don't get to sleep as much. What is the biggest misconception people have with selection with their kind of pre-training where they kind of maybe are a little more confident in their infantry skills, but takes a little bit more than that to actually succeed within a unit of JTF2 stature?
Yeah, I agree with you. That is a great way to look at it, where sometimes people will say, man, I'm working out really hard. I'm working my ass off and I'm at the gym every day and, I'm prepping for selection. And then I ask them what types of things they're doing and, what does their regime look like? And what I realize is, and what I recognize, not everybody, but generally speaking, what I realize and what I recognize with these guys is they are working out hard, but they are reinforcing the things that they're already good at. The difference between working out and working your ass off versus training for a specific thing is being humble enough and also confident enough to say, man, my flexibility sucks. Yeah, I might be able to lift a truck, but if I'm unable to run, there's a problem there. There's a disconnect. Or if my flexibility is so poor that yes, I can squat 400 pounds, but I'm unable to bend down and tie my shoe without, rupturing a hamstring. There are differences between training for a specific event versus working out. And I think there are some guys that think, well, the hardest day in battalion was no big deal for me. This is probably very similar. I'm going to focus more on, my mental side of things. And then I think physically I'm good enough, or the opposite. I'm just going to, solely focus on, running because I can carry a rucksack, no problem. Here's the way I would lay it down. It is a grind. It is challenging from a mental, cognitive, emotional, physical perspective where everything is important. Being able to run is important. Being flexible is important. being able to shake off mistakes or whatever happened 10 minutes ago, mentally be able to say, that's in the past. There's nothing I can do about it right now. I need to focus on the next task. So all of it is really encompassed. And what's cool about selection is it's designed to do is to identify if a guy is teachable and identify if a guy has critical thinking abilities, if a guy is intestinally, physically tough. So if he's got intestinal fortitude, if he's got grit, if he's mentally and physically tough, that's what it's assessing. It's not so much like this guy can navigate like a savage and he's like pinpoint within 2 meters of every navigational point. No, they're going to teach you all that. They will teach you all the hands and feet that you need to know. You know, so there's certain guys that have reached out to me. They're like, man, can you help me with my pistol skills? I want to do selection, and I'm not very good with a pistol. And I say to the guys, I can help you. However, that is not important, man. And they're, what do you mean? Like, there are all kinds of people that have never touched a pistol before. They know that. They want to see if you're able to absorb the information that they give you, apply it the way that they ask you to, and if you're unable to figure it out on your own, do you have the ability to navigate what it is that's going through your head so you can logically come up with a problem or a solution to the problem? Or are you going to be like a deer in headlights and kind of, look at the trucking cadre and be like, I don't know what to do, right? So where I'm going with that is selection is really designed, very purposeful, to identify a few things if that individual has the attributes that they're looking for future training, right? So whether or not a guy is really good at navigation, whether or not a guy is really good with a pistol or carbine or shotgun, it really, on selection, it's not that important, to be honest.
Okay. Before you went on for selection, what other courses were you on that maybe helped prepare you for some of the challenges?
So before selection, I think in battalion, I didn't really do a lot of different courses. Like, I didn't do a basic recce course. I had a couple of driving courses at that time. The labs were coming in, so the LAV armored vehicle was coming in. So I did a LAV driver course, and then I was slated for a LAV gunner course, and then I did selection, so I missed that. I think some of the courses that helped me out would have been basic mountain ops. So the basic mountain ops course that I was fortunate to be part of when I was with the 2nd Battalion PPCLI, it helped me with exposure. It helped me with overcoming some of those discomforts with heights. It really helped me with building confidence in kit and equipment. Trusting your gear and trusting the people that are working around you. So I think that course definitely helped me out with selection success. But to be honest, like, I was pretty good at land navigation, but I got really good once I was on the assaulter course. So things like that came after.
Okay. What is the biggest misconception you think people have with the special operations community?
Biggest misconception, I think, is that everybody that is a JTF2 assaulter or a CSOR operator or a C driver operator are 6'2", 210 pounds, shredded muscle, masses of muscle. It's not the case. There are some big animals for sure that, put on multicam and you look at them like, holy man, what a specimen of a human being. But to be honest, like, the average is probably, I'd say 5'9", 5'10". The average weight is probably 180, maybe, I'd say. So lean guys, strong, physically strong, mentally on point, like cognitively sharp, and the ability to adapt to ever-changing situations. That would be the reality. The misconception of you got to be 6'4" and 210 pounds. No, the misconception of you got to be really proficient with firearms. No, they're going to teach you all that. I think some of the misconceptions are what happens when you're course loaded for either an operator course or an assaulter course versus what one needs to come in with, right? I think that would be the biggest misconception.
Okay. When it comes to your why with getting through selection, what was it through some of the hardships? Because I'm going to guess that selection is almost geared individually for each person, right? They're going to figure out who you are with all the psych profiles and go, we're going to test him a little more with water, this guy a little more with, keeping cool. Like, I'm going to guess that they lean into different people to try and see what your actual breaking point is, because you're going to be different than somebody else. So to put you guys through the exact same little thing, how do you get through that? What was your thing of, no matter what was happening to you, you're like, no, the final goal is to be badged an assaulter, and there's nothing that's going to break me? How did you get through those parts where most people go, I'm ringing the bell, I'm done, let's go home, I want that nice more meal and get out of the field? What got you through it?
I'd say there's two parts to that question. One is, just to clarify, selection is, there is a standard and everybody goes through the exact same protocol. So when a guy is on selection, for example, we don't, as an instructor who's worked selection, so I've been on both sides of that arena. As an instructor, we don't know who these guys are. So they're just a number with a penny, and it takes the human bias and it's a bias away from the situation. So whether he's an officer, whether he's from the PPCLI, whether he's a Vandu, whether he's a CSOR guy, we don't know that until after the selection. So therefore, everybody goes through the same protocols. Everybody goes through the same standard of evaluation. And then based on the performance, will dictate whether or not a guy is going to get selected or not. So I just want to clarify that piece.
Okay.
The second piece is, my why was so strong that I told myself the only way I'm leaving this process is if one of the JTF2 instructors or cadre, they put their hand on my shoulder and say, sorry, man, you got to go. This is not for you. Or I got taken out medically. So there was such conviction in my ability. I had confidence that I could do anything. And I knew it was going to be hard, and I knew I was going to make mistakes along the way, but I was so convicted that I would just keep going. I would just keep going. And the way I kind of broke it down was small little victories where, and I'll share two parts that helped me get through selection. One was I broke selection down by meal. I knew, well, I was pretty confident. Canadian Armed Forces, my limited 5 years of exposure to the Canadian Armed Forces up to that point, one thing that was pretty consistent is there wasn't too many meals that were missed. So I was like, they're going to feed us, right? So I looked at it like, all right, I just need to make it to lunch. If I made it to lunch, it would be a small victory. All right, I get through lunch, just got to make it to supper. Get to supper, yes, another small victory. I just got to make it to breakfast. And I just kept that going. And it was really the momentum that kept me going from day to day and from task to task. The other thing that helped me as well is I was fighting for a job. And as you look around and you start selection, there's 29 or 30 other capable studs, that come from their organization. You're like, man, that guy looks really fit. Holy cow, that's a big dude. And, I look around, it's a bit daunting, it was a little bit, intimidating, I guess, looking around like, holy shit, there's a lot of people here fighting for the same job. And then every time somebody peeled out, rung the bell, so to speak, and quit, I got stronger. And I was like, yes, good, get out of here, beat it. Now, I didn't know negative animosity against these people. I don't even know them, but I use it as motivation, right? Where I'd see people just stand up, pull their pennies off, and they quit and they're gone. And then, that selection load of 30 very quickly went to 25, very quickly went to 20, very quickly went to 15, and so on and so on. And every time somebody peeled, I got stronger. I'm like, yes, I'm one step closer. Beat it. That's one guy I don't have to fight for this job. Get going. And I got stronger every time somebody quit. I didn't think about quitting. I got stronger.
That's very interesting. At what point during selection did you maybe have the thing of like, you know what? I've got this. They can't break me. I've got my why going. Was there a point nearing it where you're like, you know what? As long as I keep absorbing all this information, I think I'm going to make it.
I would say I found selection to be such a cool experience. It was hard for sure, but there was things that we were doing on selection. I'm like, man, this is awesome. This is what I thought I'd be doing when I joined the infantry, right? I'm like, this is such cool shit. And I try to enjoy it. I'll be honest with you though, when selection was done and I went back to the 2nd Battalion, a lot of buddies that were waiting for me to get back and eagerly wanted to ask questions, how'd you do? How do you feel? I was like, Yeah, I don't think I performed the way I should have or could have. I won't be surprised if I don't get an invitation. So I was deflated. I kind of convinced myself that I wasn't going to get picked up. And I think subconsciously, out of a fear maybe that I didn't get picked up, I wouldn't be as disappointed. I think, looking
Kind of
back at it now.
preempting it a little, like, yeah, that's fine. I didn't like her anyways.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So
Um,
yeah, and then when the message did come in and I was selected, you can imagine I was on top of the world. Like I just was like, man, this is the greatest feeling, and I'm so glad that I actually persevered and pushed through all of the obstacles.
Now, how long did you have to wait from getting back to battalion to when you got message that you've made it, you're getting in?
I think it was a month and a half maybe after I got home because the way selection works is there's depending on how many applicants, there's multiple serials. So there could be, three serials or four serials of 30 people on those serials. So until all of the serials are completed, you just wait. You kind of wait, and they're going to determine based on all the successful completions. Then they'll determine who they're actually going to select to go on to the assaulter course. Because just because one person finishes the 7 days doesn't necessarily automatically, give them a buy to get on the assaulter course. So I didn't know that at the time, but what I do know now is it felt like forever to get that message, whether it was a no or a yes. It just felt like I was waiting a long time. But I think it was about a month and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
So once you get, you've gone through selection, you've gotten the yes, you can now go on the assaulter course. What were you, how long was it before you got the message that yes, you're going to when you actually went on your assaulter course?
It was a pretty quick turnaround. So I think I got the message late fall. At that time is when selection was running, and I got the message right before Christmas break. And then our joining instructions were to, yeah, it was early January. Yeah, so we reported early January 2004.
Okay. And so did you have, that's not a lot of time. What in that time did you do to make sure you could recover from all the stuff that you pushed you through and get yourself actually ready for the assaulter course?
I was ready. I was ready. After selection, my body was, a little bit beat up and sore, but I was back in the gym again. I'm not exaggerating. I was back in the gym probably 24 hours later.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. And so you've had a little bit of taste of what they'll put you through. Did you change any of your kind of pre-training or figuring out like, hey, maybe I should study this? Because you kind of got a little bit of like the gut check of, okay, water, like you said, right?
Yeah.
And different things like that. So did you then start changing your workout routine to go, okay, these are what I felt in selection. Let's try and work on this because it's only going to be pushed further during the assaulter course.
Yeah, I did. That's a really good question. And both of those things that were highlighted for me, some of the on selection, some of the limitations that were highlighted was the water, excuse me. So I did. Yeah, I spent a little bit more time in the pool, and I didn't have a lot of time. I had probably a month, right, before reporting in early January 2004. So I did spend a little bit of time in the pool when I could, and I also spent a little bit more time under a rucksack when I could as well, because I felt selection was a glimpse or a snapshot of what the assaulter course would probably look like.
Okay. Now, when you get there, did you have any, like, now that you've gone through it with selection, now you're on the assaulter course, was there anything that kind of, other than the little secrets and tricks that they use anyways, was there anything that had you a little bit unprepared where you're like, oh, I didn't expect this? Or did you have some confidence now where you're like, okay, I think I got an idea what the puzzle's going to be. Now it's just time to put all these pieces together.
No, not so much. For me, it was I found the information was coming pretty consistently. So we would learn something on a Monday, and then we'd be expected to apply it on a Tuesday or Wednesday, for example. So I felt like I was in a pressure cooker. I felt like, there was a lot of eyes on you, a lot of guys with clipboards, and you get taught a certain skill or some sort of technique or nuance of standard operating procedures that we're being introduced to, and then they're expecting you to apply it as taught really quick and shortly thereafter. So I felt like I was constantly learning. I was making mistakes along the way, but I was also performing pretty consistently throughout. And every week you would sit down with somebody from the course, and they would give you feedback. You know, these are the trends that we're recognizing with you. This is what we want you to work on. You know, these are the areas that we've identified as some limitations. Here's the information. Now it's up to you to fix it, right? So it was really good feedback, and it was beneficial too, because it gave you a purpose. Every week there was a new goal, there was a new purpose, there was a new drive to keep you, keep you on point.
What part of the assaulter course stands out in your mind of like, wow, I can't believe, like, it's hard, but you're like, I can't believe I'm actually getting to learn these skills? Was there any particular aspect of the training where you're like, this is kind of my little gear? I like this. Once I get into the unit, I kind of like, going into this direction or pathway.
Yeah. Yeah, all of it was really, it was really cool. Learning a lot, getting to work with some just wicked studs, man, like super smart dudes, very physically capable dudes. It was a lot of fun. I think there was, yeah, actually, there was probably a point during our training where we were doing stuff on the water, like kind of modern day pirate shit, where I kind of was drawn to that, where not so much being under the water, because I'm not a big fan of the water, I'll be completely honest with you, but everything that was above surface, like, using a high-speed watercraft to get to a vessel that is underway, figuring out a way to climb it while it's in motion, and then assault, a structure or a piece of that structure. To me, I found that to be the most fascinating and coolest shit that I did in a long time. And that really resonated with me, so much so that when I was successful and I graduated and I became part of the team, it was shortly after I was there, maybe 2 years. I was in the stalls. I was with the teams, and a course came up for the dive course, and I volunteered for it because I think it was because on SOIC I saw a glimpse of some of that surface to assault a vessel was really unique and very complex as well. I want to highlight, like, of all of the things that the organization does, in my opinion, that is by far one of the riskiest, and it is one of the things that even during training, there's no do-overs. Like, if you miss a run on a ladder, you're going for a ride. And we've seen people get seriously messed up, broken backs, broken shoulders, concussions. It's no joke. So I think part of that allure is what really drove me to want to do stuff that had a maritime feel for it. So, like, anything maritime special operations, I really dug it for sure.
That's awesome. What is your favorite method of extraction or infiltration then?
Oh man. I'd say yeah, by parachute. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, by parachute. Yeah.
Now, did you have your jump course before you? No, you didn't. Hey, you just had your mountain ops.
I did. I had basic para.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had basic jump course. So, I had an understanding of what it's like to be a lawn dart. Jumping a round chute is very different than jumping a chute with toggles that you can actually fly and steer. But yeah, so I was fortunate in battalion to receive a basic para course. And I liked it. I did. I thought it was awesome. It's a rush for sure. I mean, you hit the ground like a sack of potatoes, but they teach you how to land properly, so you limit the chances of injury. However, I think what we're taught in terms of parachute insertion at the special operations level is very, very different, and I'm not sure that a basic parachute course helped me with anything other than exposure to being in the air.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. How many jumps have you completed under canopy and then doing free fall?
Altogether, I think I've got 150 jumps now. So
okay, nice.
not a crazy amount, but about 150 jumps. And
enough to have some fun.
Yeah, and I still, like, now that I'm retired and as a civilian, I still like to jump once or twice a year. So break the rust off a little bit, have some fun. But it's just time. Time is such a precious commodity. So I do like doing it, but to jump you're dedicating a full day to, to get a couple of jumps in. I know you're dedicating
Mhm.
a full day on a Saturday or Sunday.
If you could join a warrior hood throughout society called history, like Spartans, samurai, whatever, what one kind of draws you in?
I'd say Spartan. I feel like a bit of an old soul sometimes where to me, as I watch and read and listen to anything that has to do with like Spartan warfare, I think to me, that's the ultimate warrior. That's like, close up in your face, knives, spears, swords, punches, elbows. Like that to me is like the epitome of being a full-on warrior. That's in your face. It's like so much so you can smell the blood. And that I find just awesome. Everything about the Spartan way of life and the warrior culture where, each generation was taught how to, fend them for themselves, how to fend for their tribe. And man, I think it's awesome. So if I could resonate with any era, I would say it'd be the Spartan era.
That's awesome. Um, when you got it, what became your favorite weapon to use while in JTF2?
Favorite weapon I'd say was probably the MP5 for different reasons, like different guns for different reasons. Like I mean, the Pinto Mount 50 cal machine gun is a badass weapon, but I'd say the MP5 because it's such a stable platform that it really like it shoots itself, so to speak. Like it is such a great platform for a lot of different things. So that was a cool gun to shoot. Man, like I was never a sniper, not sniper qualified, but I had a good relationship with a lot of the snipers at the organization. Every now and again they would show me a few things with the Barrett 50 cal or with the TAC 50, the Camilla TAC 50, and man, like those guns are no joke. That thing is a cannon, and that is it's one of those things that are not enjoyable to shoot for folks that have seen them in pictures or video games or in a movie. You shoot 5 or 6 rounds out of a TAC 50, like there's potential for concussion if you're not aware of what's going on. It's no joke. That thing is it's like a mule kicking you in the teeth. So was it enjoyable to shoot? For me, not really, but it's pretty cool because of what it's capable of. So yeah, I've been very lucky to being exposed to a few different weapon systems, but I'd say out of all of them, if I was going to pick one just to have some fun, it'd probably be the MP5.
Awesome. Um, what technology do you see the special operations community starting to take in as time goes on? Is there anything that you think is definitely going to be that next generation of an operator is going to need this in order to succeed in future missions?
Great question. Yeah, I do. I see the implementation of drone use. It was kind of coming on board as I was leaving the organization. And there are some guys that are really grabbing onto that capability and taking it to next level use. Where it is right now, I wouldn't even be able to speak to it. But I do from speaking to folks that are in Ukraine, speaking to folks that are in other parts of the country. It is definitely a capability, and it is an area that is, I won't say dominating the war space, but it's definitely heavily influencing the way soldiers fight today.
Yeah, it's definitely there. You can't really hide much anymore. Like, just doing a sloppy camouflage. And so like, you got to really think of your overhead cover and protection.
Yeah.
Um, how do you expect the special operations community to start to adapt in like the next 10 to 15 years with either training or even mission sets changing, new things coming about? What do you see happening with the community in the future?
Hmm. That's a really good question because in a two-part answer. One would be the guys at the organization are very intelligent. They're motivated forward thinkers. Oftentimes they are, and I mean this as serious as a heart attack. They are often 2 or 3 steps ahead of our own government. So they see what's going on. They understand with the capabilities and the training that they have, how they can implement and influence positive change. So oftentimes they're already a step ahead of our own government and policymakers. The disconnect is guys are very capable to do different things and they are very adaptable. However, if we do not have that top cover support, it's difficult to influence those change. So I think in the two-part answer, one, guys are very well aware of what they need to be focusing on now, and they're doing so. The second part is until there is legitimate synergy between policymakers, decision makers, and the guys that would be literally boots on the ground, you may see changes. You might see a decade before a significant change on the battlefield is implemented, not for any other reason than the disconnect between capability versus acceptability.
Mm. And that seems to be the problem with a lot of stuff, especially within Canada right now. Procurement for aging planes, vehicles that have been worn out, troops overseas that have to pay for their own meals and certain things like that. Like, yeah, it's an unfortunate thing where those that are serving literally have to pay their own way to go do, help other countries train and stuff like that, or to get better equipment. It's like, hey, we make this, but I had to buy it off this website because we're not getting this stuff.
Yeah.
So it is unfortunate. And I think one of the problems though too is, especially kind of Western countries, militaries are always the easiest thing to kind of cut to make the budget look a lot better. Oh, look at, hey, we've saved all this money. But then when the problem comes up in the real world and they go, okay, military, go. And you're like, with what? Yeah. You haven't given us any of these new things. I mean, you can go in that helicopter. I wouldn't recommend it, and that's kind of the problem with that is that it was the same thing after like 9/11 where it's like, okay, Canada's going to go. It's like, okay, well, what? We need some, and then there was like, all that stuff that had to be bought where we rebought some Chinooks from people that we sold to because we needed the airlift capability and stuff. So I think that's the one problem is that the public just doesn't keep well enough informed of the military to be able to keep the politicians kind of, feet to the fire a little bit where they go, hey, they need this, whether it's for peacekeeping, combat, whatever it is, humanitarian, when those problems happen, and then they all of a sudden go, well, what's the military going to do? Not much. We've already done a whole bunch on domestic ops. So I think I can definitely see where you're getting at there, where there's the disconnect of we need the military now, but you got to prep the military beforehand to get them ready so that, okay, look, this hostile action is taking place or all these earthquakes have happened and stuff like that. Yeah, it's an unfortunate thing, but I hope soon enough people start to realize that, hey, you got to kind of care for the military because during domestic ops, whether, again, it's the fires, an ice storm, hurricanes, they're always the first ones. Like out here in BC, we saw the helicopters coming up pretty quick when the Fraser Valley was getting the floods and stuff. So, I'm hoping those things start to change. Now,
I am too, and I'll just touch on one thing too for young soldiers that are looking to get after it, like they really want to get into the hardcore stuff. Those domestic natural disaster responses are something to be proud of. And when they do come, to an infantry organization or to the artillery or whoever is tasked with that disaster relief, I would say to those young folks, like, man, embrace that for everything that it is, because literally that's Canadians helping Canadians on their own soil. And that is something to be proud of. And although, you're not running around with guns, particularly in those situations, not saying that couldn't happen, but it's not particularly common, right? It's still something to be proud of. And, luckily for us, those situations don't happen every day, but they are happening more and more consistently. Therefore, when folks are in those positions to actually give back and help Canadians, oh man, like embrace it. And it's tough when you're a young 18, 19, maybe 20-year-old that just wants to shoot guns and, do land navigation, which is all awesome too. When you do get an opportunity to respond for the country, like, man, be proud of that and learn as much as you can, because those experiences are precious.
Once you got into the unit, what was there any courses or training that you were like, this is so awesome. I can't believe I'm getting paid to learn this skill set.
Yeah, I'm a little bit biased because every new skill set I kind of had that attitude. I absolutely loved everything that was CQB related. So interior combat, Understanding the complexities and how that works from a hostage rescue scenario or a combat clearance scenario, I found that fascinating. And getting an opportunity to do those skills and rep it out with some of the best soldiers in the world was awesome. And there was days where I'm like, man, I can't believe we're getting paid to do this. This is amazing. So there was a lot of experiences like that. Same with the parachute operations, like understanding how to fly a parachute under night vision while being launched out of an aircraft at 25,000 feet above the earth is a trip for sure. So like, yeah, some of those things, learning them at the time, you want to do so well and you're trying to perform that we sometimes forget to take a moment and really like, hey man, this is pretty badass. But I think now that I'm out of uniform, looking back, I smile. I'm like, man, that was pretty cool. I was glad I got to live that life.
And how many tours did you do with the Patricias? You did one tour, correct?
Did two with the
Two
Patricias.
tours.
Yeah, one in Bosnia, one in Afghanistan. And then operational deployments with the organization. I was in Lebanon 2006, and then Afghanistan 2008, again in 2009, again in 2010, and then last tour in Afghanistan was 2013.
Okay.
Yeah.
What were some of the lessons that you learned from your tours?
Ooh.
And like the big one that always kind of sticks out with you that you'll probably keep that lesson for quite a while.
I would say biggest lesson is listen to your gut instinct. When we're deployed with the Canadian Armed Forces, we are very fortunate where we have very robust ROEs, so rules of engagement, which really are designed and are very long and convoluted to protect the soldier as best as they possibly can. So I would say, even though we have very robust ROEs and we have a great deal of planning and preparation go into operations, there's still a human factor that no piece of tech and no AI bullshit will ever replace, and that is the human factor. And the biggest lesson learned is when we listen to our gut, if our gut is telling us to do something, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's probably wise to listen to that. We're going to be given a lot of information or very little information, depending on the complexity and the context of the situation. However, when in doubt, listen to your gut. That would be the advice that I would give. That's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned. During my tours, I would say the other biggest lesson would be patience. Tactical patience, patience from, relevant or irrelevant time-related information. Patience. Yeah.
And what was a big difference from battalion tour to a tour with JTF2?
The biggest difference would be the support. JTF2, you've got a lot of logistical support. You've got a lot of allied support. With the conventional forces, you just didn't have that. You had each other. You had a little bit of tech, not a lot. And I say the biggest difference is what's admirable from a conventional force task operation is guys do, just a stand-up job of figuring it out and working with what they have. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. And the conventional forces do a really good job of getting shit done with very little. Where JTF2 is, there's so much at our fingertips where you could almost argue there's no reason why we shouldn't be successful. You know what I mean? And I know, like, not to oversimplify, but it's kind of like that.
No, exactly. Well, exactly, right? It's a Honda car or a Porsche, right? Like some just have more features and options than the other one, and some are just a little more comfortable to drive in.
Yeah, that's right.
What was one of the most rewarding parts of your military career that you look as a highlight and you're just like, that's going on the top 5 of military achievements?
Ah, man. Well, I kind of alluded to it a little bit. In 2003, we did a domestic crisis relief during the Kelowna wildfires, and we were out there for I think like 3 to 5 weeks, something like that. We were out there, and at the time I was pissed because I was getting ready for selection, and it was cutting right into like peak training time, right? And then we were out in BC fighting forest fires and breathing in smoke every single day. And then I would try to go for runs in the evening because I was preparing for selection. So I was kind of pissed. I didn't want to be there. But now that I'm older, I'm a little bit wiser, a little bit questionable, more mature. Looking back at that was that was one of the most rewarding things I did as a Canadian Armed Forces soldier. Um, there's been other tasks with JTF2 that have been rewarding, like being able to provide close protection for the Prime Minister in 2009 with a group of guys that literally we got thrown together very, very quickly. We were able to adapt, understand what the job was, understand all the moving pieces to get this guy from point A to point B safely. That was a really rewarding experience as well because it was just very quick. We had good leaders stepping up, doing what they needed to do. We had good assaulters being good followers and just saying, "Hey, man, you just tell me what hole to plug, and I'll plug it." And it worked out really, really well. So that was a rewarding experience as well. And at the end of the day, man, like there's different things that happen to us when we're in uniform, and we have two choices. We can highlight the good stuff, or we can rip our teddy bear up, throw it in the corner, and just dwell on all the shit. It's very easy to go down negative spirals of garbage, and I choose not to do that for a multitude of reasons. But my time in the Canadian Armed Forces, all in all, was very rewarding. When I decided to leave, it was on positive terms. It wasn't because I was disgruntled or angry. It was because it was time for me to do something different.
What are some of the funny moments of your career that you, even now to this day, you'll just think back to it and have a little bit of chuckle and be like, I can't believe that happened?
Oh, yeah. Like certain things have happened on certain occasions where it's like, oh, that was close call, man. That was close call. And certain things were just silly, right? So like legitimately, the first time being shot at, it was quite a distance away, so I didn't feel threatened. But legitimately, the first time I got shot at where it was like danger close, where I could literally see ricochets off the wall beside me and then off the ground and, within 2 feet of my feet. Those moments are like very fresh and very clear, right? So very enjoyable for different reasons. People are like, how is that enjoyable? It's tough to explain, but emotionally charging when you think about how close and how serious those things are. Some silly stuff is like, I'll share a story with you. It's a quick story, but it's funny and close call again. But the reality is, we were doing an operation overseas one time, and we had some ladders that we were climbing up and over the top of a mud compound and to get inside this compound. And as I'm climbing up the ladder, I'm a pretty small dude, and as I'm climbing up the ladder, like the rooftop is here, but the last rung is here, right? And it's like, man, if I don't get a good handhold, I'm going for a ride, probably 20 feet to the ground. And I remember reaching for this top ledge of this rooftop that we're on to, and literally I was on my tiptoes on the top rung, and just the fingertips caught it just enough. And I remember taking a breath of courage and thinking, like, if I don't go for this all in, I'm going for a ride, and this could be real bad. And I take a breath and reach for it. And as I claw my hands into the top of this, I had enough to get my other hands on, and like a cat, clawing my way to the top of this rooftop. I remember my heart pounding, getting to the top, looking down, like eyes wide as you can imagine, thinking, whoa, that was as close as it comes. And then afterwards, what makes it funny though is afterwards, talking to my deck commander at that time, who's a pretty tall dude, he came up after me and he's like, it was so funny, man. He's like, how did your short ass get up there? I said, I don't know, man. Somebody was watching over me because I didn't think I was going to make it.
Oh, that's hilarious. But there are so many of those weird, funny, dark little moments within the military where nobody should laugh, but absolutely everyone is laughing at it. Like, yeah. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Ha, you idiot, right? And all the names, and all of a sudden, you're like, oh, what? You're like, new nicknames been created for you, all this stuff like that. Like, yeah, there's a lot of weirdness to it, but I think that's just what helps everyone cope is the fact that you can have a weird situation where most civilians would be like, oh my God, I could have died. Oh my God, what was going on? Most guys I know would just be laughing like, man, I could have died. Let's go have a dart and then get ready to go do this ruck march or whatever, right? Like it's the weird things where, I mean, they might process it different later, but there's that weird humor that comes from either the person who did it making the thing or somebody else who's just that natural smart ass within the unit that goes, hey, so-and-so, blah-da-da. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that might become a thing.
Yeah. I agree with you. That dark humor is a thing for sure. And army guys, military guys, they embrace it a lot more than I have a lot of city buddies, man. They're great people, but there's certain things that I say every now and again, and I kind of look at them, and they give me that look like, is he serious? And I'm like, it's meant to be funny, man. But anyway.
Yeah, well, and that's just the weird thing, though, right? Like it's the just when you get pushed like that and everything, like you're either going to break or you're going to try and make a joke about it to get through the next event.
Yeah.
How often did you use humor yourself personally to get through like training, anything like that?
I would say I was, aware of the power of humor, and because I don't see myself as a funny guy, and I'm stoic, I'm pretty serious, but I appreciate a good joke. Like I see the humor, and when those guys as part of the team function are the funny guys, and they typically find the right thing to say at the right time. Like I am very quick to appreciate that. I'm just not the guy that comes up with it, right? So I think humor is it's very powerful, man, to get people, to bring them out of whatever tense situation they might be into, but also to help dial guys in, right? Like a quick snappy comment sometimes is enough to like, hey, like game time, let's go.
Perfect. Let's get into a little bit of some of your martial arts career. How did you get into that?
Can we take a 2-minute pause? I'm just going to use the washroom right quick.
Not a problem.
As soon as we come back, we'll talk about that one.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
Not a problem.
Oh. All right. So martial arts. I started training martial arts in probably about 2007. So I was at the unit for a couple of years, and I saw an opportunity to kind of complement my my military career with another useful skill. So there's a gym that was in Ottawa called the Ottawa Academy of Martial Arts, a Renzo Gracie Jiu-Jitsu gym that I started at, and started with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then after a couple of months I added Muay Thai, kickboxing, and then maybe a couple of months thereafter I started adding wrestling, and those were the three disciplines that I pretty much stuck with while training pretty regularly, pretty consistently. And then around 2008, my coaches were like, "Hey, you're pretty good at this. You ever think about fighting professionally?" I was like, "I've never really thought about it, but I mean, what do I have to do? Yeah, I'm interested. What do I have to do, and how does it work?" And I was still at the unit at the time. Obviously, still deploying. Afghanistan was still very much, rotational, hot and heavy, which was awesome. So when I wasn't on deployment with the unit, then I was literally in the gym, training martial arts, and mixed martial arts was a newfound passion that I absolutely loved. And I wasn't married, didn't have kids at the time. So literally I was either at the unit, doing something training wise or deployed, or I was at the gym training martial arts, and I loved it. And I've done it ever since. So it's still very much a heavy, strong part of my life.
And what was it about those three martial arts that you stuck with more than another one that maybe would have taken its place? What drew you into those three as being able to be a nice establishment for you?
Yeah, good question. So I started with jiu-jitsu, and I liked it, but I always, not always maybe, but I just had a strong conviction that fighting is fighting. So I really wanted to know everything about fighting, and I found jiu-jitsu was limited. Jiu-jitsu is great, don't get me wrong, but it was limited. There's no striking in jiu-jitsu. There's a component where oftentimes you would start already on the ground. So that's when I added Muay Thai. And Muay Thai was, the art of eight limbs. So learning how to use your elbows, your knees, footwork. I found Muay Thai to be as cognitively taxing, if not more, than Jiu-Jitsu. So I found it stimulated my brain a little bit differently than Jiu-Jitsu did. So those two were really the two that I focused on for quite some time. And then when I had my first mixed martial arts fight, so my first pro fight, I was 30. I just turned 30 years old. And at that point, I wasn't really doing any formal wrestling. So there was, a limitation that was highlighted. And then I started to train at the Montreal Wrestling Club. So Montreal is about a 2 hour drive from Ottawa. Every Tuesday, every Thursday, whenever I could, of course, work related. As soon as I finished work on a Tuesday and a Thursday, I would drive to Montreal, train at the Montreal Wrestling Club for a couple hours, and then I would drive back. And I did that for almost 2 years straight, every Tuesday, every Thursday. So those were the three areas and the three disciplines that I focused on while I was fighting professionally in mixed martial arts.
Okay. And how did the unit chain of command when you started, like, okay, I want to compete now and stuff like that? Were they really cool with it, or like, okay, we might be getting an operator injured? How were they with it?
That's exactly what happened. There was 50% of the chain of command was all on board, 100% supportive. The other 50% of the chain of command, I would say, was not on board, and that was the reason. They're like, "Listen, are you here to be an assaulter, or are you here to be an MMA fighter? You get injured in MMA, that means you're not deployable, you're not operationally effective." And I can see it from both sides. I can honestly
Hmm.
see it from both sides. However, I will share this story, which, again, I try to really focus on the positive. So there is a positive deduction from this story. In 2010, I was deployed in Afghanistan with Joint Task Force 2, and there was an organization called REC MMA that held an event in Kandahar. And it was an MMA event in Kandahar. They did two events actually, and it just so worked out. The first event was on the beginning of my tour, and the second event was at the end of my tour. And I pitched the idea, like, how cool would it be to get a chance to fight in that MMA event while I'm in Afghanistan? Like, I'm already there. So what happened is the timing couldn't have worked out any better. Where literally the end of our tour, we were getting ripped out by the next team that was coming in. And there was about a 2 week handover. So new team comes in, old team's getting ready to go back home. And that MMA event of Rec MMA that came from Canada to put on the event for the troops in Kandahar, it worked out in that window. So the organization of that event found a fighter to come from Southern Ontario, and he knew he was going to fight a war veteran. He knew he was going to fight a soldier, and he agreed to it. And I trained to get ready for that fight. So when I wasn't on deployment, or excuse me, on operation, I was training as much as I could. I was dieting. I was trying to get my weight down because I fight at 135 pounds, and I walk around at about 150. So I was trying to get my weight down. This is all happening in Afghanistan. And I thought, this is going to be epic. This is amazing. And then 4 hours before the fight, 4 hours before the fight, the CMP, so the Chief of Military Personnel in Ottawa, got wind of this, pushed back to the chain of command in Kandahar, and they said, we cannot allow Randy to fight in this MMA event in Afghanistan for the risk of injured and for the compensation that Veterans Affairs Canada would have to consider because it's in an operational setting. And they were more concerned about me getting hurt in an MMA event than the potential risk of being killed in action. And I couldn't believe it. And it's the one time in my Canadian Armed Forces career I was embarrassed to wear that uniform. I was like, I cannot believe this is stopping this fight. I cannot believe that this is the thing that is the policymaker's decision, sitting in Ottawa from behind a computer, making a decision on what I'm doing for the country, for soldiers, for this sport of MMA. Like, it was all positive. And it was at the end of my tour. I was going home afterwards anyway. So anyway, long story short, it didn't happen. Disappointed, as you can imagine. And I ended up going to reintegration, doing a day or two of reintegration. Then I flew back home to Canada with the rest of the team. But man, was that embarrassing. Embarrassing, maybe not the right word. Yeah, disappointing. Yeah. But the positive deduction is when situations like that happen and it's outside the realm of our control, what I learned from that was here is a time and opportunity to educate somebody who does not know the ramifications or the consequences to making those decisions. Right. So that's the way I looked at it because I was pissed, as you can imagine. But anyway, it's in the past now.
And that's always the funny thing too. Like, no, you can't do that thing where there's going to be a ref and mats and gloves and stuff, but go step out of the wire there and go take care of some bad guys.
Yeah.
Oh, is there any risk out there? Oh yeah, just IEDs, this, that, whatever, people that want to kill you. Cool.
Yeah.
But
No.
again, that seems so almost typical too, right? Anybody who's been in the military and any military really, like there's some decisions that you're just like, I don't get that rationale. Like it's
Yeah.
not going to affect anything. I'm going to be going on like kind of a down rotation, get home, whatever. Like, it's not like the fight starting on first day of tour and maybe I'll be able to go do something, or maybe I'll be, just smashed in from a guy who is that much better.
Exactly. Yeah. Very different. Right. Very, very different. However, anyway, the decisions were
Yeah.
made and outside of my control. But yeah.
Now, what was the decision to get out of the military? And then how did you use that decision to continue with your civilian career that you've built for yourself now?
So 2017 is when I started to think about life after the military. So I had signed a 20-year contract and my 20 years was coming up. So I signed an additional 5-year extension with the flexibility to release anytime in that 5 year without penalty. And I knew I wanted to do something else. I knew that I still had a lot of motivation, energy, and experience to share. I just wasn't sure how or what I was going to do. I thought about joining law enforcement. Um, yeah, I thought about sticking around a little bit longer to, maybe climb the ladder of rank. To be honest, man, there was a few things that happened that helped motivate my decision to release. And I'm not casting shade. I'm just speaking the truth. When the Liberal government took power, it was clear to me that there was no intention for that government body to deploy troops like JTF2. There was no motivation or appetite to get guys like us, realistic jobs that are, going to get our hands dirty. That was clear. And that started the motivation to get out. And then there was a few key leadership, military personnel in key leadership positions that I could see influence going in a direction that I had a hard time agreeing with. So that was also motivating me to get out. And, not at the risk of certainly sounding arrogant, because that's not my intention at all. I felt like I outgrew the organization. I felt like I have so much more to give, but I felt boxed up. I felt institutionalized, and I felt like it might sound corny, man, but I just like I need to fly, man. Like there's a lot of stuff that I like. I'm gonna change. I'm gonna change myself. I'm gonna change this country. I'm gonna change the world. And that sounds arrogant, but I feel like I outgrew the organization, and it was time for me to go.
No, I can definitely kind of see that and everything, right? Because again, some governments, when they're in power, that is the best time to be in the military. They love it. They're going to make sure the money and everything. And like you said, make sure the car gets out of the garage to actually do what it does. But then, I mean, it's the same like, people with the Chrétien era and stuff like that. And, it was the hard time where people were getting out and they were given all the early retirements. And, again, dark kind of eras where people are like, okay, this sucks. This isn't the army I chose where I wanted to have one where, there's some bullets and instead we're having Mo rounds where we're going bang, bang, ba bang, ba bang,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But, and again, I can see with an organization like that too, where because it is what it is, there's probably the arcs are very established and they can't just go off and do whatever. And they are very subservient to what the government in power wants and is going to make the mandate. Um, so you're having that happen to you. Was direct action a thing right away, or did you have a little bit of time where you were trying to find yourself after the military? Because it had been 20 years.
Yeah. So yeah, I ended up doing a total of 21 years, and the last year is when I was trying to put things in order for the business. What it looked like when I wrote my business plan in relation to what I'm doing now is it's quite different. I was really going to put a heavy emphasis on tactical athletic development and personal training and fitness and health and well-being, which I still do a little bit of that, but it's predominantly now providing tactical consulting and tactical training for law enforcement, military, and a little bit of general public. So it's very different now than what I thought I was going to do. So when I started putting things in order, I started thinking about what is it that I enjoy doing? And, I like everything that has to do with fighting, fighting with a gun, fighting with a knife, fighting with my hands, health and fitness, taking care of my body, being the example of what a warrior, would think to be. And I said, well, these are the things that I like doing. How can I create a business and just call it work, And that's kind of where I'm at right now, where I absolutely love what I'm doing. It's always different. It's definitely a challenge. It's a grind for sure. There's a lot of stuff that happens, off hours that, people may not be aware of. That's just there's a lot to it, but I absolutely love it. So, I would say what I'm doing right now, I'm living my purpose. Like it might sound cliche, but there's not a day that when the alarm goes off, I don't bounce out of bed. And I look forward to influencing some sort of positive change on somebody.
Oh, I can totally understand that too. It's the same thing, kind of like, I got out with injury. So it was kind of like a lost bit of like, okay, what do I do? I had goals. Those goals got completely smashed out. And then it just kind of became like, like serving those that serve, finding, gentlemen like you, getting the stories out there and just learning more about these people and stuff. And I mean, eventually, once the podcast starts going too, find those that we've lost and, kind of do little mini documentaries on them and stuff like that. So,
Good for you,
yeah,
man. That's awesome. Yeah, good for
it's,
you.
yeah, eventually get a little van, convert it so it could be a little mobile studio and go find people like that stuff. Cause I mean, Zooms, it's not the same as an in-person interview where that energy happens and you just get that flow going.
Agreed.
And, again, and then, like, yeah, there's just so many little things like that. Like I'd love to eventually get this podcast going up enough where it's got enough viewers where we can have, sponsor people for the Invictus games and stuff like that and have these really cool little things where we find out like, hey, this is happening. Well, let's help this person out and stuff like that. So that's kind of the main goal is just find a way to keep serving, military and first responders. So
Amazing.
yeah, and again, like once you find that thing, you're just like, okay, I feel that passion. And it is hard work. Like, trying to find people to interview and, certain things like that and scheduling never lines up and stuff like that, especially with school and everything and trying to, okay, I got spring break and then, the arm going all gimpy and everything. But yeah, it's something like when you find that thing and you just like, it's hard work, but this is amazing. Like talking to a gentleman like you, where I'm like, this is awesome. Like just the energy. And then like, once this is done, it's just like, now I'm going to want to push further and further and keep getting the stuff going and finding this stuff. So yeah, it's, when you find that passion, it just makes everything feel so much better.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, man. It's awesome. Well, for what it's worth, Brian, man, keep doing what you're doing. I appreciate you reaching out. It was awesome getting to chat with you a little bit. And if you want, we can do maybe a future part two.
I would love that. I would love that.
I do, however, I do have to wrap it up only because I'm running some CQB training and I gotta get going like within 20 minutes. So
if I could just get you to drop your info for everyone to find you, that would be awesome.
Sure. Yeah. So Randy at directactions.ca. That's an email. If people want to send me an email, by all means, I'll respond as soon as I can. Instagram page, Direct Action Combat. The YouTube channel is Direct Action Combat Performance and Facebook Direct Action Combat Performance. So those are the social media feeds that are pretty active. If guys want to send me an email a little bit more personal and ask me direct questions, I entertain it for sure. And I really like those questions. I would say with caution, if I don't respond, in 2 to 3 days, please don't take it like I'm not interested. I'm just a busy dude, and I'll get around to it as soon as I can.
Well, awesome. Thank you very much for doing this, and I can't wait for the second interview to happen in the future.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Brian. I really appreciate it. You have an awesome day. Keep safe, and good luck with the arm and the shoulder, and hopefully
Will do. I had imaging done the other day, so hopefully I figure out what it is.
Yeah, right on. Well, good luck with that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Have yourself a great one.
Thanks, Brian. We'll be in touch.
Thanks for your time. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help grow the show. And remember, get back up.